Most current, present, and past events, as well as people, aren't fantastic or deplorable. Rather, they are more ambiguous. I am by no means claiming the Dark Ages were outstanding or delightable. However, the narrative that the Dark Ages were cataclysmic and decrepit are just as historically inaccurate as the latter. Before we proceed, let us first define what the Dark Ages actually are and why they are called the Dark Ages. The early Middle Ages ran 1,000 years from 476 AD to 1000 AD. In fact, some historians even count it until 1066, which was the year of the Norman conquest and the founding of the modern country of Britain. Just a little side note there for you. The term Dark Age and the concept itself was created by the Italian scholar Francesco Partrecca. I'm very bad at Italian. There's a couple names in here I'm not going to be able to pronounce, but I will do my best. It was intended as a sweeping criticism of the early Middle Ages. This is how the time of the movement of the so-called barbarian peoples, including the Huns, Goths, Vandals, Bulgars, Alani and Suebi, and Franks, into what had been the Western Roman Empire was called. That is how framing works. In psychology, the framing effect is the cognitive bias wherein an individual's perception is influenced more by how the information is worded than by the information itself. Let me give you an example. You could really see this if you look at two media outlets. If a media outlet supports a current political party, they will make the headline something that helps their interest. Let's say the economy is doing very well. An article that dislikes the president, whoever it is, I'm not here to get political. I'm just trying to show you how this technique works. If they support a president, it'll say, booming economy, record stock market, and record levels hit in GDP. However, if a news outlet is not friendly towards the particular administration, it'll say something to the extent of, despite negative forecast, economy surprisingly bounces upwards. Both of them are containing information that illustrates that the economy is doing extremely well. However, they frame it in the headline to get you to perceive the event a certain way. And much like that technique that is being used today to convey a particular narrative, the term Dark Ages was called that in the 1300s to illustrate and frame future historians and individuals in that time period to think of the Dark Ages as a backward barbaric era. This time period was framed as the Dark Ages to give future generations and historians the perception that the early Middle Ages was a dark, backward, and regressive time period. Now, here's the historical narrative that has been taught, regurgitated, and passed down in history books and taught all around the globe. Even if you have an elementary level of education, you will see this. And in many mainstream books. I got a book about the history of Europe. Now, the book is very well written. The only issue is that they use the mainstream narrative of the Middle Ages as backward, as decrepit, as barbaric. Most mainstream history books will do this. That's why you must do your own digging, do your own research, and come to your own conclusion. This is the mainstream narrative you're going to hear in any mainstream book and by any mainstream teacher, whether they are a college professor, a teacher at the local high school, or whoever. During the Roman Empire, which lasted from 625 BCE to 476 AD, the globe, and most importantly, the European continent, were stable due to the Romans controlling the Mediterranean. As a result, trade was stable due to the Roman Navy's strong presence in the region, unedited, unfiltered, dissuading pirates, vandals, etc., and you had clearly defined trade routes along coastlines, which made it easier to ship products into other countries. We see this today. Most of our products are shipped from Asia back to the US. Most of the products are then looked at in containers and emptied in California at the Bay, Long Beach, San Francisco. About 70% of those products. Just like we do today, the Romans had certain routes that they would take, or routes, however you want to pronounce it, that were well defined. That way you knew how to get to a place, you didn't waste a lot of time, and you had a systematic way of making trade. The Romans also had a stable currency, which was used as legal tender across 3 continents, multiple countries, and 2.2 million square miles. That's how large the Roman Empire was at its peak. Cheap, abundant grain was shipped from Egypt to feed the Roman population, and in return, Rome blessed Egypt with protection from invaders. In trade, they provided the Egyptians with the most opulent materials available on the market, including, but not limited to, gold, gems, expensive wood, ivory, and luxurious textiles. Rome also built paths, roads, and they were similar to water fountains. It was trade routes that they built on the land in order to make trade from the North African continent easier. My geography is not that bad, it's just my handwriting is really bad. What was interesting when I was studying the history of Egypt, this has been a number of years ago, the country did not really get very strong until Rome took over. Rome created most of the infrastructure. Rome stabilized the country. And that is when we have most of the written records of Egypt. Just a little side note. I can do a video on Egypt in the future if you guys are interested. By no means was Rome perfect, but their military might, stability of their currency, and governing administrations and presence gave Europe and the globe peace, stability, and prosperity. However, in 476, when Rome fell, Italy, Europe, and the rest of the world fell into a 1,000-year funk full of chaos, endless warfare, barbaric behavior, regressivism, and unstability. I'm writing this essay to separate fact from fiction. It is factual that the Roman Empire provided stability and was instrumental in the development of the modern world. However, to claim that when Rome fell, that everything instantaneously turned into chaos, and that the chaos and instability lasted for 1,000 years, just isn't accurate. The narrative, let's have some fun here and keep you awake. The narrative that when Rome cataclysmically collapsed, everything turned to shit, and a 1,000-year clusterfuck proceeded. That's the narrative. After Rome fell, everything turned to shit. Now back to regular scheduled programming. Firstly, the narrative that Rome collapsed is only half true. Western Rome collapsed. However, Eastern Rome lasted for over 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire. When Diocletian took over, one of the previous emperors, he decided to break up Rome into two territories in order to make it easier to govern. Constantine really built up Eastern Rome and used Constantinople, the capital city of Eastern Rome, as the main outpost for the administration instead of using Rome. Something else interesting is that the Byzantine Empire, which is Eastern Rome, the inhabitants of that area referred to themselves and viewed themselves as Romans. It is called the Byzantine Empire so historians could distinguish it from the Western Empire, and so the empire could have its own distinguishable time period, unconnected from the Roman Empire. You know how confusing that would be if you had to always say the Eastern Roman Empire. We don't even refer to the Western Roman Empire because it was a complete area of chaos. All these different areas of power that were overthrown. You had a power vacuum in all these areas that was sucked in. How confusing would that be to say the Roman Empire fell besides the East? The Eastern Roman Empire. Not the West, but the East. Hey, young man, I was going to give you an A for your paper, but you wrote the Roman Empire, not the East, not the West, not the Southeast, not the Southwest. You see how confusing that would be? That's why, although they refer to it as the Byzantine Empire, to separate the historical time period and to separate it from Rome, if you were to go back into a time machine, go back to that time and say, "What's up, Byzantine people?" They'd be like, "What the hell is the Byzantine Empire? What kind of crack have you been smoking? We are Rome. We are Romans. We are not barbarians. You mother..." You get the point. Although rulership was extremely volatile and coups happened regularly, the Byzantine Empire itself and its institutions lasted another 1,123 years. I could, verbatim, ad nauseum, in grandiose pageantry, describe each country's administrations, rulers, migrations, and developments in chronological order. No joke. I've been reading through those right now, the early medieval period. I could literally be like, And then in the Franks, Clovis was the king, and then Clovis's sons took over, blah, 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 and it was really gone. And you'd be like, it'd be like you're watching Pubic Broadcasting Station. You'd be like, when's this going to end? So I'm not going to do all that. Get to the point right now. However, in order to save paper, because we got a lot of damn trees being cut down, time, and to attempt to get my point across, I will only be debunking different myths of the Middle Ages and showing the reader, in this case the listener, that the Dark Ages weren't so dark after all. I refer to them as the not so dark ages. They were little dark, but not pitch black dark, like in a cave without any light. Here are a few stated reasons of why the Dark Ages were dark. Endless wars. From the Norman Conquest, 1066, up until the fall of Napoleon, the French and English fought each other in more than 20 separate wars, some of which lasted several decades. You ready to hear in less than 60 seconds the early history of Britain and France after they became countries? Britain and France fought a war. Britain and France fought a war. They had peace. War, peace. War, peace. War, peace, war, peace. War, peace, war, peace. Okay, I'm not going over 60 seconds. But you get the point. Talk about endless wars, you got to read the history of early Great Britain. But let's expand on this point. According to journeys.com, and that's journeys with a Z, not like the tennis shoe, but it's the cool version, it's Journeys. The countries that have had the most wars are 1. Spain, 2. France, 3. Hungary, 4. The United Kingdom, 5. India, 6. Austria, 7. Poland, 8. The Philippines, 9. Iran, whatever the hell you call it, and 10. The United States. I did write down how many wars these countries had, but I don't think it would matter. You know, this country fought 5, 4, 6, 7, 8, 3, 3, 5, 4. I don't think it'd matter. Out of these 10 countries, only 2 of them existed during this time period. Iran, which was involved in the Arabic Empire. The Arabic Empire was really expanding itself during this time, while Europe was building little nation city-states that were the precursors to the modern countries we have today, like France, Great Britain. But you get the point. And Austria was founded in 966, 3.5 years before the end of the Dark Ages. The point I am trying to convey, let me say it in this voice because I'll sound a lot more intellectual. The point that I'm trying to convey, if the premise that this time period was bad due to endless wars, how come out of the top 10 countries that fought the most wars, only 2 of them barely existed? Oh, what do you have to say to that? Even though my ancestors are from Great Britain, I suck at that, but you get the point. I am by no means trying to convey that the early Middle Ages were a time of peace. As a matter of fact, it was far from it. But it wasn't particularly full of warfare compared to other time periods, preceding it and following it. Another narrative that people like to say is people in the Middle Ages thought the earth was flat. Well, we have people now who in the modern age think the world is flat. Very insane when we have NASA satellites. But I guess those aren't real satellites. Those are fake satellites. And everybody that works for NASA is fakey fakers who work for the fake NASA. With extraordinary few exceptions, no educated person in the history of Western civilization, until now, you have B.O.B., Kyrie Irving, and many celebrities, but this was written in 1997. With the extraordinary few exceptions, no educated person in the history of Western civilization from the 3rd century BC onward believed that the earth was flat. Historian Jeffrey Burton Russell, if you have 3 names, you're very intelligent. If you go by 3 names, people use that to show how intelligent you are, wrote in 1997, a round earth appears at least with Pythagoras. I slept during that part of school, just like the rest of it, who was followed by Aristotle, among others, in observing that the earth was a sphere. By the 1st century AD, the spiracy, I guess that's a word that was in this article, so Mr. Russell, 3-name guy, must be right, smarter than I am, of the earth was accepted by all educated Greeks and Romans. Of course, we know the Dark Ages is what they were referred to when the Roman Empire fell, and if the Romans and the Greeks and even the Phoenicians, according to this historian, based on his dates, they believed that the earth was round, spherical, as he stated. I guess sphere can be an adjective. Maybe triangular can be an adjective as well. I don't know. But according to him, if the Phoenicians, the Romans, and the Greeks believed it, then that means nobody in the Middle Ages believed it. But of course, he stated no educated person, but Kyrie Irving, as far as I know, graduated high school. So did B.O.B. and other celebrities that say the earth is flat. But let's not get into technicalities. Let's get into the next point. Hygiene was barbaric and borderline non-existent. Oh, yeah. Did you know people in the Middle Ages, they shit their pants and just laid in it? Did you know that they used to go bathe in the sewers butt naked? And then they used to roll on the ground with bugs and critters? Ugh, disgusting. Hygiene was barbaric and borderline non-existent. People in the Middle Ages would rub their teeth and gums with a rough linen. Recipes have been discovered for paste and powders they might have applied to the cloth to clean and whiten teeth as well as freshen breath, according to WayneOralSurgery.com. According to this website and many other sources, which I won't name because you don't care, talked about how people in the Middle Ages attempted to brush their teeth, whiten their teeth, and make their breath smell good. According to Quora.com, typically people bathed once a week during the Middle Ages. Private baths were extremely rare. Basically, nobody had them, but public bathhouses were actually quite common. The Romans built the bathhouses. They didn't simply stop existing in the Middle Ages, and people didn't simply stop using them. In fact, people didn't start bathing regularly until the 19th century, and some people never started bathing regularly. So people in the Middle Ages weren't particularly unkempt compared to the Romans and the populations that preceded them. What I always found strange, this is sort of when I began to change my hypothesis. It talked about how in Britannica, the Romans found all this great infrastructure. The bathhouses, the roads, infrastructure. But the Anglo-Saxons, when they took over in the invasion in the Dark Ages, they quit using the bathhouses. They started bathing in their own shit and their own feces and vomit. They didn't even use the roads, and there were buildings. No joke. There's a book I was reading about Great Britain. It's like the chronological history of Great Britain, and it says, they didn't even use the infrastructure. It's kind of like saying, there's all this great infrastructure, and you're just like, this was built by the Romans? We're not using that shit. But it's a little bit more complicated by that. Than that. Not by that, but than that. I'm comparing. I'm not making a statement. The bathhouses had what you would like to call people in Las Vegas, if you get my point. Wink, wink. What happens in the bathhouses stays in the bathhouses, right? During that time, you saw a spread of Christianity, especially since Constantine spread Christianity to the West when he was the Emperor of Rome. The bathhouses were seen as necessary evils, but like Christianity says, as you know, you don't indulge in too much pleasure. You got to subservient, be subservient to the Lord or God or whoever you believe in. These preachers would say, okay, pastors, bishops, teachers, clergymen, whatever they were called. I don't know. I'm not that into religion. To me, it's kind of boring. If you're into it, you do you, boo. But they would tell the people in the bathhouses, don't bathe too much. Because firstly, you would see naked women. Men and women would bathe together. They only separated you based upon your religion. The Jews had their own bathhouses. People who were Muslim, almost said people who were Islamic, I don't know, but they had their own bathhouses. But the pastor would tell them, don't use it too often, don't overindulge in pleasure. Other than that, though, people did bathe once a week, which comparative to the rest of the world up to that time and after it until the 19th century is pretty standard. All I'm doing is holding everybody to the same standard. Lack of innovations. The compass, eyeglasses, gunpowder, mechanical clock, and the spinning wheel were all created during the Middle Ages. Now that I've debunked a plethora of the most common myths, I will now attempt to hypothesize why individuals and historians created the myth of the Dark Ages. Before I proceed, I must, and this is the fine print, like when they tell you at McDonald's, this coffee is hot, don't spill